So I wanted to talk a little bit about some auditory strategies that we use in listening and spoken language. So you guys have maybe heard of auditory verbal therapy. A lot of times that you hear that with listening and spoken language. So just basics about what AVT is it's like the management of technology. So we want to make sure that kids are getting devices as soon as possible and that they're programmed right, they're working, doing strategies and techniques to help them learn to listen and understand spoken language. So things that you can do for AVT are like age-appropriate activities like games, books, routines. It's all very natural, things they're already doing. And like, yeah, the daily routines. And a big part of AVT is that with parent involvement, that parents are going to make the biggest difference. They're the best teachers. So it's really important to get the families involved in the whole process. Next. So another big part is, we deal with this, especially with the younger kids, is that their brains are in training. So you may have heard about neuroplasticity. It's basically when from birth to 3 is the time the brain is making all these connections. And so we really want to get as much language in that, like visual language, ASL, spoken language, you want that auditory. So it's really important to remember at that point that their brains are in training. So some factors that affect the auditory brain. So that's basically, our brain is divided into different portions. Like ASL is typically with the visual side, whereas spoken language is with the auditory side. So that they call it the auditory brain. So for example, if a kid's born profoundly deaf, never has technology or anything, that part of the brain isn't going to get stimulated because it has no input. So things that kind of affects that are the consistent use of amplification. So making sure they have devices that will amplify that so they get those inputs. Aggressive management of hearing technology. So that's like making sure they're wearing them all waking hours, making sure they're programmed right, that they're actually on and working. Kids, if you notice, like when babies are born, we always talk to them with like, hi, how are you? You know, that like, it's called parentese. And it's because at that point they clue into those different kind of sing-songy things, and it attracts their attention way more. So getting that auditory brain to kind of start making those connections is very helpful by slowing down and kind of doing that sing-songy voice. Other things that affect are like noise and distance, obviously. If it's a really loud background noise or if it's far away. And you guys all know what hearing age is, but that's basically from the time that the kid has had correct amplification. So since they've been actually hearing. So the kid could be 4 years old, but have a 2-month hearing age. So some just being auditory verbal minded is listening should be encouraged all day, teaching through daily routines, encourage active and passive listening, because as we know, 90% of what we learn is overheard. So we want to get them not just tuning into what's right in front of them, but what's going on around them. And so the environment in which the child is listening should be monitored. So like if there's a TV going on and nobody's watching it, turn it off so that there's not background noise and the child can kind of hear what the family members are talking about. So those are just kind of some basic things behind auditory verbal thing, just like a background of it. And I think I already mentioned this, but trying to make it natural. A lot of parents get overwhelmed with feeling like, oh, I have to sit down and do therapy with my child for like a half an hour every day. And that's not what we want. We want what they're already doing, but just doing it more effectively. So like you're changing the diaper, well, the diaper's got to get changed no matter what, but you can talk to them while they're doing it. Oh, I'm changing your diaper. You've got a poopy bum, stinky, or, just stuff like that. So It's like stuff they're already doing, but making it not like more effective.
Narrate.
Yeah, narrating. So these are some different auditory verbal strategies. There are definitely way more than this, but these are just 22 we compiled. I have slides for each one if we want to go through those. I don't know how we are time-wise.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay, let's do it quick.
Okay.
So auditory first. This is just making sure they're wearing their technology all hours of the day, making sure that they're working, and just that we're very auditory minded. So auditory feedback loop and speech imitation. So kids modify their speech by what they hear. So if they say something and they get a response, it kind of affects how, oh, like that was an effective communication, I'm going to do that again. Or they didn't understand me, I need to figure that out. So for example, a toddler hears their mom say muffin. The toddler then says suppa, but mom says, doesn't that muffin smell good? Then the toddler changes it from suppa to suppin because they heard the IN. So that auditory feedback loop is they're hearing it said one way and then they're saying it and the brain makes that connection like, oh, I'm seeing it wrong. Another one is positioning. So where you're sitting with like your child. It's not very natural to have like your listening hoop or your hand in front of your mouth. So things to get that auditory input is like sitting next to them, having the kid on your lap, just things to make it more natural, but so they're not necessarily watching your mouth and reading your lips, but that they're getting that auditory close up as well. Acoustic highlighting. This is one that we do quite naturally anyways. So it's trying, like if a kid's missing a specific thing, like there's an example of blue shoes. If they were just getting shoes, but you wanted them to get the blue shoes, you can highlight it by get your blue shoes. So it's kind of highlighting that word that you want them to notice. Or look at the snake. I like cats. They're missing the S. You obviously want to make it natural so it's not like, oh, I talk like cats. But it's like if you're teaching them the sounds, you can highlight it a little bit like cats. Yeah. So listen closely. So it's things like just reminding the kids like, oh, I heard something outside. What is that? Oh, it's a fire truck. Just little things like that, like helping them make the connections like, oh, I hear that ringing. That's the phone. Like, oh, the phone is making a sound. Just helping them to like clue into those things. Auditory sandwich. This is a big one we do. So I'll say like, this is a cookie. And then I'll hold up a cookie and I'll say cookie. So you get the auditory, visual, auditory. And like sometimes with kids who already know sign, it'll be like cookie, do the sign, and then say cookie. So they're getting the auditory, a visual, and an auditory. And you can do that in reverse for ASL as well. This one's pretty self-explanatory, repetition and redundancy. It takes kids a long time. I can't remember the exact number, but it's like they have to hear a word a certain number of times before they actually memorize it or know it.
19.
There we go.
19 times.
19. So talking about it and doing those a lot are really good for them. And kids never get sick of repetition, let's be honest. You can watch Frozen 40 million times.
More than that.
Another one is auditory closure. So this is like a familiar sentence, like the song Itsy Bitsy Spider. So you wait and let the kids fill it in. And it's fun in those situations, especially for kids with low language, that they feel like, oh, like I know what's coming up. So, and that way they're talking and they're doing it. Sabotage is a really fun one. This is like kind of a silly one to do. It's just trying to get kids to talk to you. For example, I'll be cooking with my kids and we're like cracking an egg, and I'll have an egg and I'll have to ask them to tell me what to do. And they say like, put it in. So I dropped the egg in its shell into the mixture, and they were all like, ah! So then they're like, you have to crack it and open it. Or like, I'll tell a
You
kid, tell
cracked it onto the table
Yeah.
one time.
Yeah, but
It didn't say in the bowl.
yeah, there's just a crack on the table. Or things like I've told kids, like, I'm pouring your juice, tell me when to stop. And they didn't tell me to stop, so it overflowed onto the table, and they were like, what? So just things like that kind of make it fun. Or like, oh yeah, this purple jacket. They're like, that's cute. So it's just a fun way to see if they're listening or if they can explain it to you. So this one's a big one too, wait time. It takes kids longer to process. And so if we just say like, oh, what's that sound? Oh yeah, that's a fire truck. Like they don't get that opportunity to like process and think. So I count to 8 or 10 in my head sometimes if I ask a question like, oh, what do you want to eat? And then usually they will get it, especially if you're like expecting an answer, they will say something. But it's really important to give them that time that they can say it rather than just jumping in and saying it for them. So there's a saying, ow, observe, wait, listen. And then these are just some other quick, fast ones that you can read through later.
Do you want me to click on it?